You've both mentioned from the outset of the conversation, patient centricity, right? The patient being the ultimate, patient accessibility and impact being the ultimate goal. This is a difficult question, probably to put parameters around, but talking about the efficiency enablers that we've been discussing, how impactful do you think they could be or should be in terms of time to clinic and clinical efficiency and patient impact? Again, I mean, it's a great big giant kind of general question to answer, but Bob, I'm curious, maybe you could start. Like, what do you envision, like, being able to do in terms of these efficiency improvements?
So I think we talked before about the timeline component of things, and that can be pretty real. But the time to get studies done now is still, especially within a competitive environment, is still very, very difficult. Can you apply some of these tools to that to then really try to trim that down? That's a place where it's going to be very interesting to see how artificial intelligence plays out to do that. But then taking a step back onto the discovery side of things, the thing that excites me the most is that it's not the things that we know at this point, but it's the things we don't know. So thinking about different modalities that we're going to be able to bring forward and really to target pathways in a way we've never been able to do before is the thing that's very exciting to me. So it's not so much you're going to gain the efficiency, but you're actually going to gain the ability to do something you never did before.
Mm-hmm. Nadim, I'm curious if you want to weigh in on sort of that general conceptual question. You came from big bio, you started your job at Cullinan a couple of years ago, and I know from talking with you that part of the appeal there was agility and nimbleness. From a visionary, C-suite sort of perspective, what do you want to be able to enable by improving the efficiency of R&D at Cullinan?
Yeah, look, for me, I think the most important aspect of this is, and one thing I often tell my team is, I think with the smaller companies, with the inherent nimbleness that comes with that, we should always make sure that decision making is clear, crisp, and quick, and that speed of execution then follows very quickly. And so I think, as I think about, kind of the efficiency improvements, it's being able to make sure that, again, you're very clear about what your go, no-go hurdles are, and that you make very clear decisions, and that you stick with your prospectively defined go, no-go criteria, and then you don't try to remove the goalposts after you get the data. And I think if you can be very disciplined about that, that helps you in phases of kind of the research and development process. I mean, the thing I would add to what Bob was saying in discovery, I mean, we're now turning lots of undruggable targets into druggable targets through, protein degradation and other modalities, which I think is really super exciting and pretty much an untapped area. As we think about, the clinical trial process, the FDA has now said, they want to see diversity in clinical trials because historically clinical trials have not represented the larger community. And so I think there are opportunities and spaces with trial sites, which perhaps we haven't been to before, which, reflect the patient populations that are going to be taking your medicine and that we need to include into clinical trials. And I think that's another example where patient identification through artificial intelligence can really help you there as well. So I think this is multifaceted, but when you add them all up, hopefully it'll continue to reduce our development times.
Yeah. Nadim, part of a CEO's job is to obviate, right? To prepare for what could go wrong, to be ready for what could go wrong, and have a plan to address it. What stands in the way? What current challenges is the industry and is Cullinan facing in terms of R&D efficiency and efficient discovery that you need to be prepared for? Like what could get in the way?
Sure. I mean, look, generally for the market, access to capital is generally an issue in the current market environment and conditions. So I think having access to capital is important. We're fortunate that we do have runway into second half of 2026 to do the things we need to do to advance our program and portfolio, but not everybody does. So I wanted to recognize that also. And in actual fact, the other thing I would say is, actually in times of tough markets, although counterintuitive, but that's when you probably need to make the bold decisions to actually invest in the business, as opposed to just focusing on cost savings. Cost savings, it never led to prosperity. It's the investment in the business that leads to prosperity, right? So that means maybe you bring less programs forward and you bring the most important programs forward versus trying to apply capital equally to a range of assets with different quality. So I think that would be another aspect of it. For us, as I think about my prior experience, I think, again, decision-making is really important. And I can tell you, I've sat in executive governance committee meetings where we've killed a program to discover 2 years later there's a project team still working on the program that you thought the company had killed. I mean, that's not good. And I can safely say that's something we definitely don't do at Cullinan Oncology. And so I do think this, this struggle with decision-making and being able to move quickly is really, really important. And I also think another area that we're starting to see a little bit more now is, sometimes platform technologies can be important, but they do need to lead to a product for patients. I mean, a platform in and of itself isn't something that, drives value. It's whether you could turn that platform into products for patients. And I think sometimes there's risk when the company's focused on a singular platform. It can either all work or some of it work, or none of it can work. So there is some inherent risk there, which is why we chose the modality agnostic approach. We are not a platform company. And also with platforms, as I think about oncology, it could work in one tumor type, but it may not work in another tumor type, because we know cancer is a heterogeneous group of diseases. So for me, it was really important to address both of these challenges. And so our modality agnostic approach has allowed us to develop a very diversified pipeline where we're able to spread the risk across programs. And then secondly, we remain rigorously focused on having a very high bar for go, no-go decisions across the whole R&D spectrum. So because we're not dependent on a single platform, it means we're less emotionally invested in continuing to advance programs that shouldn't be advanced whenever we get a negative or a great result. So for us, each individual program has its own risk profile and its own independent go, no-go decision-making. And so we do that through what we refer to as thriller or killer experiments. So when we get the killer result, as the name suggests, we quickly kill the program and reallocate our resources. When we get the thriller result, we think about how can we accelerate this program and enhance the investment. And that way, we're making sure we're only bringing the most promising molecules into the clinic, where the cash burn obviously goes up much higher. So ultimately, I would say, look, the time, energy, and resources spent on programs that don't meet your prospectively defined, go criteria really provide little benefit. But this type of decision making does take discipline.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting points on the platform technology. I spend platforms are sexy right now. There's no denying it. There are a lot of platform companies popping up all over the place, and development, discovery and development efficiency is one of the hallmarks, I guess, one of the talking points of these platform approaches. But you bring up some really good points around to what end. So I appreciate that. Bob, you're in a very different position than Nadim is. Obviously, I don't want to assume that resources are unlimited for the research organization at Amgen. That would be not a safe assumption. However, you're a little less subject to the whims of the markets. If not resources, what could stand in the way of the R&D initiative at Amgen?
So we do have resource constraints as well, though, right? So I mean, there are things that you have to make decisions. Only so much can move forward into clinical testing. So you're really it's highly competitive within the company then to make sure that you really are bringing forward the best therapies for patients. And one of the things that, Amgen really prides itself on is looking for big signals, essentially, right? So they're not going after things that you really have to squint to see in terms of their effect size. So they're really, that really helps with the decision process, right? Where, you either get to the point where you need to be to really impact the patients and the disease state, or you do not. So for us, I would say we're also not dependent on platforms. We have quite a few that are really showing impact within the clinical portfolio, including like both antibodies, siRNA technologies. We have essentially a GLP, what I would consider an antibody drug conjugate, moving forward within the obesity area. There's a lot of things that Amgen does. Legacy Horizon had done as well too, to move forward into space. The thing that I think that we tend to do in the industry in general is we look for the win, right? And then we don't come back at it. So for instance, if you're going into a space, you're taking a drug into oncology or cardiovascular, and you're hitting, a certain subpopulation within that, it's a win, right? So you're benefiting those patients, but then there's others that are left behind. So I think as we grow as an industry, we really need to make sure that we're really looking at the disease as a whole and really making sure that we are not leaving patients behind. Now that is now iterative process in terms of thinking about that and then bringing other therapies forward, but really trying to do that, I think, is where we need to get to.